Well, it's another podcast. Just called Picking It Out. Yeah, it's another podcast, y'all. It's called Picking It Out. We got the legendary WCW and TNA announcer, Scott Hudson, in the house. Yeah, and we're going to be picking it out. Well, hey, y'all. Hope everybody had depending on when you're watching or listening to this, hope everybody had a Merry Christmas. And appreciate y'all tuning in once again with us here. Y'all keep on coming back. So we appreciate it. Had Neil Pruitt on a few weeks ago, and I mentioned then that this is pretty much turning into a wrestling podcast. And I'm fine with that. Anybody that knows me knows that. We got a real special guest here with us today. Guy you really don't hear a lot about anymore in the wrestling world. But man, what a critical part especially of WCW was this guy. And got a lot of, probably one of the hardest working guys in the business. Not only did he work for WCW, but he was a probation officer and still is. And he did both at the same time, and I'm still trying to wrap my mind around that. I just learned that recently. But anyway, we're going to get into all of it. We got Scott Hudson with us. How you doing, man?
Good, Andrew. I love that theme. That was very Life by the Drop, Stevie Ray, Robert Johnson at the Crossroads kind of vibe. That was awesome.
I like your taste. Got some good taste in music.
That's good stuff.
People seem to like that thing, man. I don't know. Just a little silly thing, but where you at now? You in Georgia?
In Georgia, yeah. Been my home, born and raised.
Wow.
Still live out here on Lake Sinclair in central Georgia.
Oh, nice. Man, what's the weather like out there? Is it froze still?
Yes. I mean, this is Georgia. We're not, it gets below 40 and they close the schools like the old cliche. And
yeah,
we had, oh boy, from like Thursday before Christmas, depending on, again, like you said, on when people are watching this, from Thursday, which would have been the 22nd, maybe, up until the day after Christmas, we didn't get above 20 degrees, which is unheard of for Georgia. So it was nice. Our pipes didn't freeze, but I think we were the only one out here on the lake that didn't have that problem. So it's a nice balmy 40 today, almost swimming weather.
Man, I'm telling you, I'm in Northeast Alabama, and they said this is the coldest Christmas since 1989. It was 4 degrees 2 or 3 nights in a row. 4 degrees. I checked my phone. I don't ever remember it. I was barely born, probably, when it was that cold.
Wow.
So the other day, after it hit like 34 or 35, I was like ready to run around naked in the yard. I felt like it's insane. So
this is also blues, wrestling, and a weather podcast.
Hey,
that's a niche that's got to be like that big.
Hey man, I'll tell you, I don't know why, but you say that. It's funny because I've always been interested in the weather. I'm actually a certified, what do you call it? Not chaser, but storm spotter.
Really?
Yeah. I'm certified storm spotter, which anybody can be. I mean, it's really easy to get certified. But I've always had interest in the weather. I remember used to, when I was a kid, our local Huntsville, Alabama TV station my granddaddy, when I was staying with him, he watched the weather. It's like he's watching the news at 10, and about 10:12 or 10:15, the weather comes on. Everybody has to shut up because you got to hear the weather, just to make sure it's not going to rain more than it did yesterday or something. But I don't know. I've always had a connection to it. I don't know.
I've got family that are, how some people will put their television on cable news, or they'll put it on MTV back in the day, the cliche of when they used to play videos. I've got family that will do that with the Weather Channel. That's their background.
Wow.
And when I've been around them, I had no idea, but that's an interesting as hell channel. Maybe I'm old. I'm not. Maybe I'm old. I am old, but maybe that's my age betraying me. But it's not just, hey, it's snowing in Syracuse. That's one thing, but it's lots of history and the 12 most deadly tornadoes and that kind of stuff is very interesting.
Yeah, it really is. They go in depth on those historic tornadoes out in Oklahoma and stuff like that. I really like that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, how has it changed growing up? Since you grew up in that part of Georgia.
Right. Yeah. Well, I grew up in Thomaston, which is over there, not far from the Alabama border in west central Georgia. And you're up there and down to where I was in Thomaston and across that swath of northern Alabama, northern Georgia was kind of like a tornado alley. That whenever the weather went sideways, we would turn on, Channel 2 out of Atlanta, and they would do the best job with the weather, and we would just be waiting, for the tornado warning. I was like, oh, come on. I don't want to watch. I want a warning. I want to know there's a real one out there. And I don't want it to come over my house.
Yeah.
But, I was like, oh, those poor people over in, Tallapoosa. But, that was fun. And it's kind of the same way still. We get rough weather. And you guys kind of get this up in Alabama, but it's a lot more us. Obviously, it's a lot more Florida and Louisiana, but we get hurricanes. When those hurricanes will come up and like go between Cuba and Florida, and then come up and make landfall on the Panhandle, they'll come like right over the Lake Country in central Georgia, where I am now. And it's not a full blown hurricane because it'll dissipate a good bit, but it's rough. For a day and a half. It's like being in the end times of a hurricane, and it can be a lot of fun out here.
Yeah, usually when everybody's getting the hurricanes, we get tornadoes from that. Usually,
right.
I've never actually experienced a hurricane, but I've heard they're. I know quite a few people that have, and I've heard they're kind of scary. You can't do anything if you don't do anything before it gets there.
That's correct. That's true. And again, what we're seeing is nothing compared to what the people down at like Mexico Beach and Port St. Joe and Panama City and Mobile and all those guys see.
Right.
But it's still and I can only imagine what it's like down there when they hit, but because it's pretty bad up here and we're in the mid-state.
Yeah. Well, did you like growing up? Where you grew up, was it safe and stuff back then? Like, we didn't lock our doors.
No. That was, again, in Thomaston, for those that have ever heard of Thomaston, there's Thomaston proper, and then there's like the north side, which really doesn't, it's just the north side of Thomaston. It's not like a separate town or anything like that, but lived out on the outskirts of the north side of Thomaston, and same thing, went and played in the woods every day and didn't lock the doors and, played with, had the dog running up and down the road and did the same old stuff. It was small town Georgia. It was a lot of fun. That's a good town. Had a lot of good memories from Thomaston.
Did you grow up on the Georgia Championship wrestling days, liking that?
Can we take like 2 minutes and let me tell you this? Because I am so proud.
Absolutely.
I grew up in Thomaston until I was 10 years old, and then moved. My father was transferred with his job down to South Georgia, down to Tifton.
Oh, yeah. I played Tifton.
Really?
Yeah.
Most people went through it. It's on the interstate heading to Florida.
Yeah.
So Georgia Championship Wrestling, it discovered me in 1970 when it was still on WQXI channel 11 in Atlanta, and it was I think an 11:30 or 11 o'clock on a Friday night was the time slot. And I watched that and just got hooked walking through the living room. I think my grandfather, my father's father, and my grandparents were visiting, and they were up watching it. My grandfather, massive wrestling fan, they were watching it, and I stumbled through, long past my bedtime to go get, a drink or whatever, and just was hooked immediately. 1970. Wow. So I watched Georgia Championship on WQXI channel 11 in Atlanta. Then it moved over to WTCG channel 17 in Atlanta, and then the great split between ABC Sports. It's ABC Sports, not the network ABC, but it was just called ABC Sports when Ray Gunkel passed in 1972, and his widow, Ann Gunkel, started All South Sports. And so, long story, but Ted Turner, who owned WTCG, gave Ann Gunkel another hour. She had from 7 until 8. Georgia Championship had from 6 until 7 on Saturday nights. That's where the 2 hours on Saturday nights for WCW came from. It used to be 2 different shows. So I got to see Georgia Championship, and then I got to see All South Sports, which, that was for a couple of years. Moved to Tifton, so we still got Channel 17, still got those shows. Then get this. Also, Georgia Championship would do, nobody remembers this, would do a live show on WRBL Channel 3 out of Columbus every Saturday afternoon at 4 o'clock. It was a live wrestling show in an arena, and it was just for the Columbus market.
Oh, wow.
So they would go tape the TCG show at the arena where we did it in WCW, that same room, and then they would drive to Columbus to do a live TV at 4 o'clock on WRBL, and then drive to wherever the house show was that Saturday night, usually Marietta. There was also a Georgia Championship show that did the exact same thing, except it wasn't live, and it was on Channel 41 out of Macon. They even had like a Macon heavyweight champion, for Georgia Championship. So I got Georgia Championship, All South Sports, Georgia Championship from Columbus, Georgia Championship from Macon. Also got Mid-Atlantic from a television station in Savannah that was on our cable system. So I got to see David Crockett and Bob Caudle and, a young Ric Flair and a young Ricky Steamboat and a young Greg Valentine and Rufus R. Jones and all those guys from the Mid-Atlantic territory. Then I got Championship Wrestling from Florida, from Channel 6, WCTV in Tallahassee. So I got Florida stuff. I also got Continental, Gulf Coast from Channel 4 in Dothan, Alabama. So I grew up on all of that. 3 different Georgia Championships, All South, Mid-Atlantic, Florida, Gulf Coast or Continental or Southeast, whatever name it was going by at the time. So I got it was heaven for a wrestling fan to be exposed to that much television. I've told Cornette that story before, and the first thing he said, of course, where are the tapes? Like, I have no idea. I didn't have tapes.
Yeah,
no such channel. I'm like 10 years old. But every weekend, it was, whatever that turns into, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours of wrestling every weekend.
Wow.
That was awesome. And that's why you become a fan, because, you could follow the guys territory to territory, and you could see angles developing that worked in Florida. Then they would run the same angle in Georgia. Hey, that worked in Florida. Let's bring it to Georgia, because most fans weren't following it that closely. It was brand new to them.
Yeah.
And do the same thing with Alabama and, with different talent. And sometimes the talent and they're heels in one place, babyface in another place, and feuding in Florida and tag teaming in Georgia. I just adored that stuff.
It was it had to be such a time back then, to grow up with the territories and those kind of days. As a kid, did you ever get to go to any of the tapings or a match of any kind?
Sure. Well, now TV, not really. Because TV was in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Florida TV was in Tampa. That's a bit of a hike from South Georgia. But the house shows would come around. Used to go to the Griffin Sports Barn, just north of Thomaston, between Thomaston and Atlanta. They would run there one Saturday a month. The guys from my church where I grew up, they were big fans, and I was dirt poor growing up. And, my folks wouldn't take me. But the guys from the church, hey, Scott, we're going to the wrestling matches. I was like, good. Let me know how it was. And, oh, come on. So they'd pay the, $250 or whatever it is for me to get in and have a blast. Saw so many great old timers there. Old timers, they were 28 years old then, but whatever. Yeah. But we get down to the Tallahassee Sports Stadium, get to the Houston County Farm Center over in Dothan. When I'd go visit, my maternal family down in Cairo, Georgia. We were really close to Dothan and Tallahassee. We'd pick one to go see when we were down there. And so, yeah, got to see a lot in Griffin, Tallahassee, and in Dothan. And then every now and then make the trek over to Albany and see what they had going over there.
It's just interesting to me because I've talked to so many people from this world. Some I've met through music, like Mick Foley, he and I became friends through music, basically. He's kind of the exception, I guess. But, so many like, Buff, Mark Bagwell, and they didn't really grow up being a fan of pro wrestling.
Yeah.
And it's a whole thing that you don't really think about till you start kind of listening to them. But for some reason, I feel like I've always been able to tell if somebody's really passionate about something. I don't know why, but authenticity don't really lie. I've always been able to tell, you were very passionate and you really enjoyed what you were doing, and you were really good at it. Well, I think one of the most underrated voices and announcers, that there is.
Well, thank you very much. Thank
you. Guys like you and Tony Schiavone, just natural, man. And I'm very glad to hear that you grew up loving it, just like I did when I was a kid. Like if I got grounded in my teens when Nitro and Raw, the Monday Night Wars, you were there for all that. If I got grounded, the only thing that I give a shit about was watching Monday Nitro. So Mama would ground me from watching Nitro.
Oh,
that was
you get grounded by getting sent outside. You can't stay home.
Yeah.
You're grounded. Get out.
Or just go to your room and can't turn the TV on at 7 o'clock.
Oh, that hurts.
Monday night. So yeah, but I'm very kind of warms my heart to hear that you had a passion for it.
When Sting made a movie of Sting's life.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was called Moment of Truth.
Yep.
This was 20 something years ago, and I was in that. And I went to Nashville to film my parts of the movie, and I knew Sting a little, but he was such an icon, to coin a phrase. I didn't get to hang out with him in WCW. We didn't hang out with that echelon of guys. Flair, of course, being the exception, but mostly I was hanging out with the mid card guys and the superstars: Savage, Hogan, Sting. Those guys. They didn't have anything to do with a C-team announcer, so that's fine. Nice enough, but again, I wasn't part of that circle. So I didn't know Sting that well. Still don't, for that matter. But when we were making the movie, they cast me as an announcer, obviously stereotyping. And I was in one of the rooms, like the green room, and I was talking to somebody else, one of the local wrestlers that they had brought in just to take bumps for background shots or whatever. And we were talking like you and I were just talking about the old school stuff and all that. And he looked at me and he just said, "You know about all that?" I said, "Well, yeah. Who doesn't?" This was like 2004. I said, yeah, who doesn't know about all that? And he goes, I never knew that about you. I always thought you were one of these, you were just a dirt sheet guy that glommed on when Hogan and Vince started their run in the 80s, and that's how you got. No, God, no. I hate that stuff. I want like 60s and 70s old school stuff. And so then we hit it off, and during that whole filming, all we talked about was old school stuff. I don't think Sting was a big fan growing up, but he learned to become one
Yeah.
because he loved the sport. Obviously, because he's still doing it at whatever 64 or 5 years old, however, it still looks great doing it.
Yeah. Jumping off.
Yeah, no way. No way.
Uh, well, how did what kind of jobs did you have like as a teenager and stuff before you got into wrestling?
Disc jockey.
Oh, really?
I was disc jockey down in Tifton for we had two stations out of the one ownership building, WWGS 1340 AM, and at the time WCUP 100.3 FM. The FM was 100,000 watts in central South Georgia. So
that's a house.
At night you could hear it from Jekyll Island to Albany.
Yeah.
So that was great. And
was that like a top 20?
It changed. We changed formats from beautiful music. I don't know if you ever heard of that format. It's terrible. It was an automated station where you had these big reel-to-reel machines and a computer that, my friend Tony Rowe and I would have to write the code for and program the computer to play,
oh, wow.
The automated format stuff. But the AM side was, spinning records and playing cart machines and reading PSAs and hosting the swap shop and whatever the hell. And so it was old school, old town radio. So I worked there from 81. I guess I did my last thing with them would have been like 1990. By that time I had long since, become in my real job, and I had done wrestling already. So I just had to give it up. But ended up going from being a disc jockey to being a high school and college sports play-by-play announcer. I did basketball, football, baseball for the colleges and high schools down in South Georgia. And so that's where I learned of the skill, such as it is, of being able to call sports and keep the interest up and take the listener on the ride. And, radio is so much different than television, as Tony, among the many millions of great pieces of advice, was something along the lines of, you don't always have to talk. The picture can tell the story. Well, there's no picture in radio.
Yeah.
So you've got to talk, otherwise it's dead air.
Yeah.
And so that's a skill, and it was one of the toughest parts of doing wrestling was to stop talking.
Yeah.
That what I'm seeing can tell the story. What the viewers are seeing can tell the story, and I don't need to say anything. Of course, now with Michael Cole and people like Michael in the WWE, whom I do not know, never met, they fill that void by talking about trending and talking about tweets and trying to upsell and get you to the shop zone and whatever, and instead of just shutting up and letting the picture tell the story.
Yeah,
I understand that. That's what he's told to do, and the business has evolved, and that's fine. But
yeah,
that would have been difficult for
me. I haven't watched it, with the exception of AEW. Dustin Runnels is a friend of ours, and he invited before all the shutdowns and COVID and all that, he invited us to a AEW taping. So I did go to that, and I watched it a couple of times. Don't follow it. It's just not the same. It's too, like you said, it's too fast paced. They're trying to sell too many things. My ADD brain is already bad enough, and it's like, y'all are making it worse with this damn stuff. But, I'm interested how you got into being a disc jockey? How did you just go up there and apply, or did you have a
Yeah, that
really?
was it. This is small town South Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they needed disc jockeys. They were paying $3.35 an hour. I needed something to do. Okay, you ever been a disc jockey before? No. Great. Sit right here. We'll tell you what to do, and that was it. Everybody, and you would probably agree with your background. Everybody should do radio or live television once in their life, and I don't mean like one time. You should do it for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
It helps you with your extemporaneous speaking, with being able to communicate and tell stories. Also helps with your writing because you can't and and huh and all that through a broadcast, so
Right.
you can't do it in writing either. But just the umbrella skill set that you develop from doing radio and live television, you can't get that anywhere else. And it's not even doing like pre-tapes, doing like audio books. That's a skill too, but
Yeah.
you can stop down and I pronounced the word wrong and start back over.
Yeah.
But when it's live, it's out there forever, whether you screw it up or whether you're perfect.
Yeah. That's a good point. How did you get? How did the high school thing come out of the radio thing? Did you kind of feel like you had or did you enjoy using your voice and
Oh
wanting
yeah.
to kind of pursue that?
Yeah. Well, I played ball in high school and for legendary 2 weeks of college, so I knew better. I knew better actually after the first day, but I stuck it out for 2 weeks. Um, so when the general manager, said they were going to start airing the high school football games in competition with the other AM radio station in Tifton, he said, do you want to try this? I said, sure. Have you ever done it? Never thought about it. Okay, you're hired. And so I just
You're perfect.
transitioned from being from spinning those records and to doing that. And it just again, knowing the sport helped.
Oh yeah.
Playing football, and I never played basketball, geez, but played baseball and football in high school. So knowing the sport and liking the history of the professional sports and the college football, I'm a huge fan. So I knew what I was seeing.
Yeah.
That helped. Instead of like the old Andy Griffith comedy bit of what it was football.
What it was football. Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
highly
love that.
recommend that to anybody else.
Yes.
That's what I think they were expecting, and I ended up, he's not too bad.
Uh,
He can do next week's game.
Absolutely. I recommend it too. That's one of the best things ever that a lot of people probably don't even know about,
Right.
depending on your age, I guess.
Yeah. Well, he did so much more stuff,
Yeah,
and that
sure.
was so early on that nobody
Yeah,
remembers. But that's if you can find the Andy Griffith, what it was football. That's
it's
a
gold.
funny, yeah.
Really is. Now was you going to where did you go to college? Did you say?
College was at Valdosta State
Okay.
in South Georgia.
And
The Blazers.
did you go like while you were doing the play by play
Yeah.
for the high school?
Yes.
Were you going to further education for your job you have now that you've?
Yeah. Yeah. I was studying criminal law. And I knew as much, and I'll tell you this straightway, and I'll say this: you can use this blurb and put it out all over the internet if you want. If there was money to be made in radio, I would go back doing it today. We're recording this. It's 1:30. I would start at 2:00 doing radio again. It was the most fun I ever had at a real job. But again, there's in 2023, there's no future in radio. You just do it for fun. And, when I retire, maybe I will do it for fun again. But no, that was something I did because I had a passion for it and I loved it. And I knew that it was going to help me in my other career. But I knew that it wasn't going to be something I was going to do for a career. So I was studying something completely different in college.
Yeah. Where did you get the interest to go into the criminal justice field? or how did you?
You know, I honestly don't remember. I know that when I was in junior college before I went to Valdosta State. I was at junior college there in Tifton at Abraham Baldwin College, and my advisor, well, not my advisor, a professor there that had I was in one of his classes was also a guitar player in a church youth ensemble that I was a singer in, believe it or not, and great guy. And I had my designs on wanting to be a doctor. So I had taken every medical, you name it.
Mm,
I'm going to be a doctor. So I studied everything. I stayed up nights studying and did well, did really well in the academic portion of it. And then I went to observe surgery for the first time at the hospital in Tifton. And Tifton has a regional medical center. It's not like a little tiny, 10-bed hospital. It's this as big as a college. And they do a great job. And so I went to observe that, and that was all it took. I went back and said, I'm just not cut out for this. Is there any room in what is it that you're an advisor for? Criminal justice? Yeah, 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 yeah. You got any room in there? And it was probably something like that. My connection with Frank Simon, a great guy. And he was kind of like providing me a soft landing from that aborted medical career that I think the world is better off never got off the ground.
how about that? And all these years later, this is what you made. So you made a difference in so many people's lives.
Well, we try. I would have made difference in a lot of lives had I gone the other way, but also
Yeah,
not in a good way.
it might have been.
I
It
would have
might.
been on the other side of the bench in the court. I don't see too many doctors being sentenced to prison, Dr. Hudson, but
Yeah.
you're the first.
Well, during this time, you're older and everything. Are you watching what Jim Crockett's doing now? Are you still keeping up with wrestling?
Yeah, back in the 80s. Oh yeah, yeah. It was it was the Great Escape that I found back in 1970.
Yeah.
Um, seeing Bob Armstrong and
Oh
Jimmy
yeah.
Dancing Bear and Bill Dromo and Buddy Colt and all those guys, Oki Shakina and El Mongol and Dick Steinborn. It was the Escape then and became and remained the Escape. And so yeah, I've watched everything again, and this is still in the getting Florida, getting Mid Atlantic, getting Georgia. The Columbus show had gone away, the Macon show had gone away, but it was still on what was now TBS,
Yeah.
and a superstation, not an Atlanta station.
Right.
And there were other shows. There was the Jody Hamilton, the assassin, had started the initial incarnation of Deep South Wrestling in Lovejoy, Georgia, and he had a TV show with Nick Patrick and Rock Hunter as the announce team. So that aired on Channel 31 out of Albany. There was the World Organization Wrestling out of Pensacola. I cannot remember who it was that owned that, but they had it was a rough little group, but that was where Bob Holly started.
Oh yeah.
Uh, Hardcore Holly,
Mm-hmm.
he started down there, and I remember thinking, "Boy, this is a really bad show, but Bob Holly's good." And so he when he was, and then ended up seeing him at a WCW taping, doing jobs for somebody on one of these tapings they would do in like Gainesville and Dalton and
Mm-hmm.
Anderson, South Carolina, and Chattanooga and wherever. That he showed up there, and I was with my friends. And hey, that's Bob Holly. He used to be on this really horrible show called World Organization Wrestling out of Pensacola. He's really good, and sure enough, I'm not taking any credit for it. He was his own man, but he was a great hand. But so I was still watching everything that came up,
Yeah.
even the bad stuff, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and did you have an opportunity to get involved with the publication that you was working with, or did you try? Did you pursue that, or how did that happen?
I somehow back in 1984 stumbled into like 4 free issues of the Wrestling Observer newsletter. And I think because I had subscribed to Wrestling Eye magazine, that got me 4 free issues of the Observer. So one day, just in the mail comes these. I don't know if you remember the Observer. You obviously don't remember 1984, but it was, just on a manual typewriter on 8.5 by 11 front and back single space double column, just wrestling news, just news.
Yeah.
No editorializing, no nothing really. And that came in the mail one day, and I'm like, what is this? And I read it, and it was just this eye-opening experience that Dave Meltzer had put together. And I read through it and poured through it, and he had the subscription information. I can't remember what it was, like $10 for 3 months or whatever it was. And so I subscribed for a year or whatever right out of the gate. And so from there, I wrote to him and told him, I said, hey, look, I live in Georgia, and all of that provenance I just gave you about all the shows and TVs and stuff. So I became what amounted to like a stringer for him, unpaid, obviously, just doing it for, to further the business. So that was it. And then that I ended up finding Pro Wrestling Torch and Matt Watch and Arena Reports and some other newsletters back in the mid to late '80s, and follow the business that way.
And did you ever go to any of the matches during that time, or was you just
sure.
riding? Yeah.
Yeah. Went to, again, still going to Tallahassee, go over to Dothan. Mm-hmm. If they were at the Houston County Farm Center, Tallahassee Sports Stadium. Every now and then I would make the trek up to Atlanta, about a 3-hour haul from South Georgia. But there were two, there was a billion shows at the Omni, but there were 2 shows at the Omni, and I'm thinking this was the summer of '87. I stand to be corrected on this, I'm doing this from memory, but one of them, this was in the afterbirth of Crockett Promotions purchasing Mid-South Sports, Bill Watts's territory.
Yeah.
That they brought the Freebirds back, and the main event was the Freebirds versus the Horsemen. And I was not going to miss that. And so I drove up, and whatever was on the undercard, and it was the Omni, so it was a terrific undercard. But that was just that deafening roar when the Freebirds came out back to the Omni for the first time since 1981. Incredible. And then the next month, if I'm remembering it correctly, was the first War Games. The match beyond with, oh boy, I can't even remember, Dusty and Nikita, maybe Lex, Dusty and Nikita and the Road Warriors, maybe against the Horsemen. Yeah. I can't remember if that was it, but it was something. That was the guys that were being pushed. So if that wasn't it, it's close enough for Jazz. But that was, I went to those 2 Omni shows in 2 successive months, and that was about the only times I got up there. There is one TV taping for the Saturday night show that I went up for, probably around that same time somewhere. I had never been, and those shows were free. You just had to show up outside the studios over on Techwood, just on the west side of the connector in downtown Atlanta, near Georgia Tech. And if you showed up, you got in. I mean, until the room was full. I don't think it was ever full. It was just, it was squash, 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 squash. So it was, I'd rather go pay $10 to watch the real stuff than sit for 3.5 hours of squash. But I went once, and I had the videotape for the longest time, but there I am on the front row chanting rock and roll when Ricky and Robert were, coming out, and they got on me, and I remember I was in like a purple Izod shirt. I'm just rock and roll, taking a complete photo of myself. But so that's out there somewhere.
Oh man. Did you ever get to meet any of the guys or anything like that? As far as
Sure.
Just where they knew.
Oh, you mean back then? Back in the 80s?
Back then.
No, it was the dying days of kayfabe, and there were still more than 50% of the people in the business, probably well more than 50% protected it still.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter that I wrote for the newsletters and that I knew a great bit about the business by that point, but I wasn't in the business, so I was not someone you talk to.
Right. I got you.
Didn't get to meet anybody. Would have been great.
Yeah.
Marked out like crazy, as evidenced by the unfortunate rock and roll chant there at the TBS studios that time.
Man, what a time that would have been, and that,
Oh yeah,
when the Freebirds come back, that's
oh, I I wasn't around for all of the great big shows of the '60s and '70s and whatever,
mm-hmm.
But I would say that may have been the biggest pop I ever heard, and it could have been because I was popping along with everybody else. But to see the Birds back in the Omni was amazing.
Wow. And all the while you're still at what you call your real job.
Yeah, the shoot job. Yeah, still working like crazy.
That's did you, I know you kind of came into that kind of by a fluke,
Yeah.
Did
Thanks
you?
to Frank. Yeah. What's that? The
The
working in criminal law. Oh yeah. That was because I couldn't handle surgery. You think it's bad to get surgery? It's something else to watch it. That just and
I can't
in
imagine.
This line of work that I do, it's in the early days. I've seen. This is horrible, but I've seen. There goes my wife, by the way, on camera. I've seen dead bodies. It just goes with the territory for this line of work, and and it's sad, and you never get used to it, but it is part of what you do.
Yeah.
But there was something about seeing a live body cut open that I could not handle. They could have taken a dead body and sawed it up with a chainsaw, and I wouldn't have blinked. But it was live, and things move around in there, So I wasn't interested. I ran back to Frank's office and begged to be a criminal justice major.
Man, I totally get it. I mean, I think it takes a special kind of person to be a EMT.
Yeah.
Any of that kind of stuff in that surgical room.
Yeah.
I not just anybody can just say, I kind of might be good at this. No, you got to be.
Yeah.
You got to be like born almost to want to do that. I feel like, and
I think there's a lot to that. I agree
with the law stuff. Kind of stumbling into that. Did you develop more of a passion for that, or was you just such a good?
Yeah, absolutely. I realized that I can't say this is what I should have been doing all along, because it's the old thing about if you're happy with where you are right now, it's the sum total of every decision you've ever made. So who knows if something had changed, it's like the butterfly effect.
Yeah.
But yeah, once I got into this line of work, I realized this is what I love to do, and it's never let me down. It's never been, the old cliche that if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. Well, yep. I've never worked a day in my life at this or wrestling.
Yeah.
Never.
Oh, well, how did you get involved with WCW?
With WCW, well, if I may jump back just a little, I moved to Atlanta back in 1988, and with my shoot job, obviously,
mm-hmm.
and this is country comes to town. I'm coming from South Georgia, moving to the big city. Everybody's I literally remember one of the detectives with the Tifton Police Department, a tremendously nice man named Mitch Williams, who I think has passed away, called my mother and said, well, I just want you to know that I'll make some phone calls up there, and we'll make sure he's looked out for, because I don't think he's going to make it. They thought I was going to go up there and get killed like the first weekend, and they were serious. So I moved to Atlanta, and of course it's Atlanta, Georgia. There's wrestling every 30 feet. Yeah. So I make fast friends with Stephen Prazak, who's still my best friend other than my aforementioned wife walking around the house. Um, so Steve and I would go to wrestling shows anywhere we could find them around Atlanta, which again is pretty much whenever we want. So we went to a show. This would have been in 1989 out in Carrollton, Georgia, and it was promoted by Joe Pedicino's Georgia All Star Wrestling Georgia All Star Wrestling. And Joe Pedicino and his wife Bonnie Blackstone hosted an 8-hour block of wrestling on Channel 69 in Atlanta every Saturday night from 8 o'clock until 4 in the morning. They would show 7 different hours of wrestling, and then the last hour was just the fills, and they would put in to expand it out to 8 hours. And I'm sorry, 6 hours. They would show 5 shows. That's right. It was 6 hours, not 8, 6 hours. And so it still went until 2 in the morning. And so one of the shows was the Georgia All-Star Show, and I watched it, and it was great. And he had a WCW show, a WWF show, the Memphis show, I think the Puerto Rico show, and maybe in one other one, or his show, the Georgia All-Star show. So we go to the show, and it's good old Georgia local wrestling, except the ring announcer was lost without a map. I mean, he was calling guys by girls' names and masked wrestlers by like shoot names, and it was horrible. And I had by this point been doing radio for almost 10 years and fancied myself as, I kind of knew what I was doing. And I went up to Joe, never having met him ever. And I just said, I don't know what you're paying this moron, but I'll do it for free. And he said, you're hired. And so the next show, I was the ring announcer, and I didn't screw it up. And so then he said, I got an idea. I want to try something with you. So he put Steve and I on his Saturday night show, that block. We had a segment called Point Counterpoint, where we would basically highlight the top feuds of every show that aired on that block. And Steve was the heel and I was the baby face, and we would just argue about who was right and who was, getting the better of the other in the feuds in Puerto Rico and in WWF and WCW. Yeah. And so that worked. And then he put me as the play-by-play guy on the Georgia All-Star show. And so that was it. Well, the Georgia All-Star show aired, probably 10 stations around North Georgia, including the block. And a lot of the WCW guys, watched it. Or would record it and watch it on Sundays, whatever. And they got a huge charge out of Steve and I, our commentary. We worked for $5 a month. So we knew that we could get away with murder.
Yeah.
The commentary. What are they going to do? Fire us and find somebody else to work for $5 a month? So we would make these inside jokes. And as an example, we had a phantom title change for the tag team titles one week because the team had quit and had dropped the belts off, but had never lost them. So we created this entire storyline about how they had won the titles at a one-night tournament at the Ed Farhat Arena. Ed Farhat was the Sheik. It was the Ed Farhat Arena, and we made up some other dumb town. And so they loved that. WCW guys like Page and Disco and Canyon, although Disco was part of our group, no, in WCW yet, but Canyon and Page and Brian Clark, Wrath, those guys that kind of hang out and would watch it. So we kind of got in with them, and we would all get together and watch pay-per-views, WCW and WWF pay-per-views back when that was a thing. And so that was it. And then one night or one day, if this is the answer to your question, I'm at a place called the Abbey in Atlanta, which is an old 1800s church that at the time was a restaurant and is now a church again, believe it or not. But at the time was a restaurant, a really nice, almost Parisian looking place. And we had our annual awards luncheon for the office for the court personnel at the Abbey. Well, I just got named Employee of the Year. So it was awesome. I mean, I got up and stood up and got the plaque and the whole drill. And, it was very humbling and an honor to get that, because it was a room full of just the best in criminal law.
Yeah.
And I sat back down. No sooner had I sat down than the waiter comes over. Sorry, Mr. Hudson. I said, yeah. And he said, I've got a call for you at the maitre d' stand. I said, okay. There's no cell phones. This is 1995.
Sure.
So I run over there and I answer Scott Hudson. I said, yo, Scooter, this is DDP. I said, what's happening? I said, it's not really the best time. He said, I got somebody that wants to talk to you. And it was Eric Bischoff.
Oh, wow.
And Eric said, Scott, we've got an opening for a C team announcer here. Paige has sung your praises. A lot of people have. And we think we can find something for you to do. If you want to come in and audition, we'd love to have you try. I said, perfect. When? He said, how about Tuesday at whatever, 1 o'clock, whatever time it was. And so that was it. And I went in at the CNN Center, downtown Atlanta, where WCW used to have their production facilities. People thought it was the headquarters. It wasn't. It was just production. Went in. There's no receptionist, just a little, room with chairs and a table. Sat there forever. Keith Mitchell, who was a
producer,
incredibly talented man, stuck his head out one of the side doors and he goes, are you Scott? I said, I am. He said, hang tight. We'll be with you in 1 second. I said, all right, take your time. So I sat there another 10 minutes. He stuck his head out again. He goes, Scott, we're ready for you. I said, super. He said, just come in this door. So I come in that door, and the minute I'm on the other side, I'm on the set of WCW Pro with Bobby Heenan.
Oh, shit.
And I'd never met Bobby in my life. He was just a guy that I watched for all those years. And Keith goes, Scott, this is Bobby Heenan, Bobby Scott Hudson. I shook his hand and said, hey, Bobby, I'm a big fan. Nice to meet you. He goes, all right, good luck. I said, all right. Keith said, okay, we're gonna do a 60-second hard time open. Scott, this is WCW Pro. You're the host. Bobby's color. You all play off each other, but Billboard, the pay-per-view. I guess you know what matches are on the pay-per-view this weekend. I do. All right, go back and forth. You got to make a hard time of 60 seconds and pitch to the ring in 3, 2, and that was it. Wow. I had less time than I just told you to do that, and I did it in one take.
Wow.
And they said, this wasn't about how good you are. It's can you work under pressure? You did it. Job's yours. So that was it. And I was in.
Unbelievable. So after that, how long was it when Eric kind of offered you a contract, to do?
Oh, well, you don't, the next day. I mean, you don't work there without a contract.
Yeah.
You have to because of, the rights to your name, image, and likeness. I was doing NIL stuff before it was cool, I guess. But, so our contract was the next day. Maybe I'd say the next day, but later that week.
And what were your obligations actually going to be? Was it just going to be doing the one show initially?
Correct. The first show, the only show that I was on, and the contract doesn't say you're only going to do one show. The contract just says you do whatever we say.
Yeah.
But the only show I did was WCW Pro, which was the Sunday afternoon show on TBS at 5 o'clock, which was basically like a best of the Saturday night. And it was usually, it was never me and Bobby, even though Bobby and I worked together later on a ton together, but it was me and Legend Zabisco, who was just incredible to work with.
Love him.
Yeah, me too.
So you had to be thinking, I mean, was the compensation, was it fair for what you were doing?
To me, it was. I mean, I'm getting to hang out with my heroes and do wrestling television on a big scale.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like working for Pedicino. I don't know what they're paying him, but I'll do it for free.
Yeah.
Now it's whatever, 26, 7 years after, if Eric had said, and you're going to work for free, I was, okay. You drive a hard bargain, Eric, but I'll do it.
Oh man. How many days a week, of your time would that take to do this?
Okay. So here you go. Here's, I've told this story, but it always makes me, and every now and then break down in tears. So I'll warn you. That's a joke, by the way. Sunday, get up, and I live out there in Vinings, suburb of Atlanta. near the WCW, the real WCW out on Log Cabin. And Sunday, I get up, go to the airport, which is only about a 20-minute drive, catch a plane to Pittsburgh. Get to Pittsburgh, get checked into the hotel, get my rental car, get to the building, and then by noon we have a production meeting for the pay-per-view that night. Pre-tapes, changes to the script, more pre-tapes because they've changed the script. It's just this chaos. Do the pay-per-view. Pay-per-view's over. Get in my rental car, drive to Buffalo because Nitro's in Buffalo the next night. Drive to Buffalo, get there about 2 a.m, 2 or 3, check into the hotel, get a few hours sleep as much as I can, get to the building for a production meeting for Nitro. Same stuff, pre-tapes, whatever, run sheet changes, what it did, the stuff. Yeah. Nitro comes on, Nitro goes off, go back to the hotel and sleep, get up the next morning, catch the very first flight out, 6 o'clock, to get back to Atlanta to be at the office at 8 o'clock.
Oh, my God. Are you a machine?
And then work all day.
Oh, my God.
And then Wednesday, work all day. And then Wednesday after work, go over to that same studio over on Techwood and do WCW Worldwide with either, good grief, it was usually Mike Tenay. Sometimes it was Bobby. A couple times it was Stevie Ray, who was insanely funny. And then from there, we would go into the studio and do voiceovers for International Nitro and International Thunder, which airs everywhere in the world except the United States.
Yeah.
So then go back to work all day Thursday, back to work all day Friday. And then after work on Friday, go to the Log Cabin facility to voice over the 2-hour WCW Saturday night. And then absent the pay-per-view, which was only once a month, do the same thing every week.
God, I can't even.
It was tough.
And how long was that schedule? That particular
schedule would have been, well, I did Nitro and the pay-per-views for 99 and 2000.
Mm-hmm.
So back out Nitro and the pay-per-views, and it was that. And after I'd been in for a couple of months, I was doing that. And then when I got Nitro and the pay-per-views added, and the first pay-per-views I did were the Backstage Blasts thing, which I think were internet only.
Oh yeah, I remember those
with Jimmy Barron and Chad Damiani,
mm-hmm.
And me. We were backstage basically calling the pay-per-view, but only for internet audiences. I think you had paid like $3 or whatever. I can't remember what the deal was, but it was just us goofing around more so than anything else.
Yeah. I can see why you were Employee of the Month previously.
It was a lot of fun, but again, I remember, when I had a baby, my daughter was born during that time, and my wife, God love her, was taking care of a baby. So I would do everything I could to get home, but when I could, and, to be there for my daughter, who's now 22 and keeps making noise about going to law school. I don't know if she's going to do that or not, but anyway. So that was, and I remember thinking and telling my wife, Casey, like, there's going to come a day when I look back at this and wonder how in the hell I did everything. But that's not today. I gotta go to Log Cabin. So
that's unbelievable, man. I don't know anybody else that could have done that.
Yeah. Honestly, Andrew, anybody could have. Anybody that had the passion, and loved the sport, and wanted to, could have done that. I'm not special, but if you or any of your viewers had been given that opportunity, yeah, you'd have done it. You'd have found a way. Now, granted, at 58, I am not finding a way. I'm done.
Yeah.
But I was, when 95, I would have been 31. So, yeah, 31, yeah, found a way. Get to work in the business and at my real career and make it all work. Yeah.
let's go back to that initial contract for, you said pro, right? The
Yeah,
Sunday
yeah,
morning.
that's what I did. Yeah.
Um, how long was that? How long was it just the initial one show before they saw, hey, this guy's pretty good. We need to give him more.
Yeah, this guy's a moron. He'll do all that stuff. Um it wasn't long, a couple of months, couple of 3 or 4 months.
Wow.
I remember getting the call from Eric, and if I mention Eric a lot, I can't say enough good about Eric Bischoff.
I love Eric too.
He gets a lot of heat, and people say, unkind things. And I know he and Flair have heat, and I get all that, but I've had the great fortune of, in my life, working for, in both of my careers, for some incredible people. And as you saw from my signature in my email, I'm the boss where I am now. I'm it. I'm the whatever, the big cheese. I'm it. I'm the boss.
Yeah.
And I understand that. So, but of all the people, and I've told this to Eric many times, the best boss I ever had was Eric Bischoff, a terrific leader and a genuine visionary about the sport that I love. And when you think about, oh, that's so dumb, all he did was just ride the crest of the wave, he really didn't. He caused the wave, and then he rode the crest of it, and that's fine. But what was the business when Eric got there, and what was the business when we got shut down? That was a lot of him. Anyway, what I was talking about was, I remember the day I got the call from Eric at my house saying, by then getting a call from Eric Bischoff was, no offense, was no big deal anymore.
Yeah.
It was a boss calling. Okay, what do you need? That's not a good time. It's dinner.
Yeah.
And he said, I want to run something by you. How would you feel about becoming only the third host of WCW on TBS?
Oh, wow.
It was Gordon, it was Tony, and and you'll be the third.
Saturday night?
Yeah, Saturday night. I said, oh my
Oh,
God.
I bet that meant
Yeah.
it.
I said, say when? Where do we go? When do we start? And so that was it. You got to throw Jim in there, because Jim and Tony did it for a while, a little bit, and I respect Jim Ross. God, I take a backseat to nobody in my respect for him. But for the most part, it was either Gordon, it was Tony, or it was Tony and Jim, and then it was going to be me.
Wow.
There's no way on earth I was saying no to that. So he said, well, come on down here whenever, Saturday, and we'll start running through things. We're going to make some changes. They changed the set and they changed the music, and they but it worked. It was fun.
I feel like that was pretty special for you, just because you grew up with that. That was the flagship thing at the time.
That was the show that I walked through the living room when my dad and my granddad were watching it on WXIA.
Yeah.
It's the same show. It obviously had evolved in a million different directions, but it was the same show.
Mm. Yeah, that's. I feel like personally, that was a really big thing. I think it would be for me.
Yeah.
I
at the time and to this day, as we are on the cusp of 2023, I'm still Mark. There's still things about this sport that just make me get chill bumps, and I love those moments. They're fewer and farther between anymore. But the Mark then and Mark now, and oh, you can't say that. The hell I can't. It's true.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
nothing wrong with it.
Nope, not at all.
Did Eric, offer more money or anything like that, or was it just kind of the same deal?
I can't remember. Yeah. Honestly, I never did it for the money, and that ended up becoming a point of contention, I think, for Bobby.
Yeah.
I don't mind telling you, all of that jazz you just heard me go through, like Sunday go to Pittsburgh and then Buffalo Nitro, all of that. They paid me $75,000 a year.
Not bad.
No, it was fine. Yeah. It was found they were paying me to do wrestling. Are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I stopped listening at paying me to do wrestling. I
Yeah.
didn't, I didn't care. And, I wasn't exactly making poverty wages at my real job either. So I was
Right.
doing great. But Bobby did one show at the time. And I think it was Nitro. I think he was still on Nitro at the time. And they were paying him like 210 a year. And he's doing one show.
Yeah.
I'm doing all of that for a third of the money. And he didn't like it. It wasn't that he didn't like me, but he didn't like it, and that I didn't fight for more money because it let them think that, well,
They could.
we can get away with paying Bobby,
Yeah.
you know, a tenth of what we pay Scott since he's doing a tenth of the work, and that's not fair. But and I never heard that from Bobby. I know that he had made some comments about it. But again, it wasn't personal. We got along great. I thought Bobby was just an amazing talent, and we got along. There was no heat or anything like that. But in all honesty, he had a point. I understood his point.
Sure. He's Bobby Heenan at the same time.
That's true.
There's only
and
one.
He had earned it. I hadn't earned shit.
Yeah.
I'm a dirt sheet writer who was working for $5 a month making Ed Farhat jokes, and now all of a sudden I'm doing all of this stuff.
I get that. Yeah.
Bobby Heenan has been doing it, since the '60s, and so he's earned that through. And forget what he did in the WWF, where he was just incredible and the best of all time. Forget all of that. He had earned the right to make 3 times what I made for doing less work. That's paying him for what he did, in Indianapolis in 1968.
Yeah.
More so than what he did in Atlanta in, 1998.
Yeah. I kind of get both sides of it. Those guys that Eric would bring in the mid 90s there, before it really, really, really got hot, he was thinking, he was thinking on a whole different level. Eric was. He was like a salesman, business guy. And, you talked about Eric, and when I was on tour a few years ago out in Wyoming, he invited me to stay with him and Lori.
Wow.
I stayed at their house, and, he was the very first guest on this podcast. He did that as a favor to me.
Very nice.
And the thing with Eric, man, like you said, he gets so much shit. But you got to think, these people got to think, okay, he was doing something that nobody else was doing at the time.
Yep.
And this was he didn't have a choice, because he was in that position. And all of a sudden, Ted Turner decides he just wants to go live and compete completely. Like, what the hell are you supposed to do?
That's right.
And, not everybody is going to say he was the greatest guy in the world. I mean, he's the boss. You can't be. But man, loyalty is important to Eric. I feel like he's a very loyal person.
Yep.
He's a good guy, man, and he does get a lot of shit, but he's a good dude.
This is a tortured analogy, and it's going to sound dumb, but when my daughter was little, and my wife and I are both into music, musicians to a degree, but really love music, all kinds of music. And my daughter, I would tell her about the Beatles, and she would listen to, the Magical Mystery Tour or the White Album or Sgt. Pepper's and Abbey Road, and that's good stuff. But then, she would hear, Meet the Beatles or With the Beatles, those first few albums where they were putting out one every, 3 months. And it was like, these just aren't that good.
Yeah.
That's, whatever. This just sounds like every other 60s band. I said, that's the point. It isn't good, but nobody else was doing that. It was Prez Prado, or it was Andy Williams, or this.
Yeah.
And that's why the Beatles matter. not because what they did, I want to hold your hand and please, please me and all that, it is so timeless and great. And I could listen to that again today. I couldn't. I don't really care for that. Me, I don't. But I do know that they were doing it when nobody else was. And that's kind of like what Eric had to do with Nitro and the evolution of WCW in 1994. He had to, again, to further torture the analogy, he had to be kind of like the Beatles and invent something out of nothing that wasn't there. The Beatles created their sound, but there was music. There was Buddy Holly that had a 3-man band, and so it was done.
Yeah.
But nobody else had done it like that. And so there was pro wrestling, but nobody else had done it like what Eric envisioned. And I don't think that's too tortured of an analogy, because
No.
you can't argue with the success.
You're right. It's a perfect analogy. That's exactly what he had to feel like, and he did it, man, because he's a visionary. He just had the mind to think beyond what had been done, and just, production wise, and make things look and sound better. Like you're not in a little dim lit ring with one light, when you're
That's right.
WWF has got all these colors, these these, it's like everything. And I just wish people would give Eric a lot of credit. I think Vince took a lot from Eric when he became an on air character.
Sure. Yeah, of course he did. And I'll say this, toward the end there, we stole a lot of stuff, including people, from Paul E. Paul E's another one that I think was a visionary.
Oh God.
And saw stuff. Paul E just had the misfortune of, and I love Paul to death, but of not being the greatest businessman.
Yeah.
But as an idea man and a creative mind, maybe the best ever, certainly in the discussion.
I'm telling you. Yeah, I agree with that completely. Well, going back to the when you got Saturday night, it was you and Larry.
It was me and Larry, or it was me and Mike.
Yeah, kind
of somewhere, and then every now and then it was me and Dream, which was, I felt so bad for those closed captioning guys. I actually said that on the air. He would go off on one of his tangents, especially when we would bring in the lucha guys, or maybe some of the Japanese guys, and I'm trying to tear through those transitions and the moves in addition to their names, and then he would try to stumble through it, and I would just look at him and I would just say, "Good luck, closed captioning guys," and I'd move on to something different.
Oh man, yeah. But looking back, especially those pay-per-views, let's go, man. That's all you had to hear from him. Like if he ain't said nothing else, he's already added to it in my eyes because he's Dusty Rhodes.
And I remember it was a pay-per-view. I never did a pay-per-view with Dream, but he did some pay-per-view, and the line he said wasn't one of those great, hard times promos or anything like that he's famous for, and legendary for. He just said, he said this word, SHITTEM.
I don't remember that.
And it was after, I don't know if it was Medusa, but a female had slugged a guy, and that's all he could say. Shit him! Shit him! Shit him! Like she hit him, but you couldn't pick that out. No, the closed captioning guys were losing their mind. Just remember that, but that passion, that was what Dusty was as a commentator. Was the guy sitting at home watching the show, saying exactly the same thing when Dusty said it.
Exactly,
and that's you to be able to channel that from the viewer that you don't even know. 2 million, 3 million people out there, you don't know who they are.
Yeah.
But to be able to know what they're thinking and what they're saying, and I'm sure when he said that, and if it wasn't Medusa, I apologize, I can't remember. But the shitum line, when he said that, it was being said at the exact same time by half of the viewers.
Yeah.
When Dusty said it. And you can't teach that. You can't read a book. You can't get experience. That's just something you either have or you don't. It's like in football, you can't teach height. You
Mm-hmm.
can teach somebody the playbook. You can put somebody in the weight room, but you can't teach somebody to be 6'3".
Right.
And that was something Dusty had that, you couldn't teach.
Well, was anybody, was Tony Schiavone or anybody like that, that they kind of take you under their wing, so to speak, and say, okay, this is kind of how we, take an extra, kind of go the extra mile to make sure
Oh,
you do.
Tony.
Yeah.
Tony did. Absolutely. Tony was the boss.
Yeah.
Um, Tony was, I don't know what his title was, director of broadcasting, executive vice president, whatever it was. But he was in charge of the announcers. He was our boss. I mean, you name it, from Gene, Bobby, Mike, Legend, me, not Dusty, because Dusty was a different kind of talent, but Lee Marshall, um, Dave Penzer, Mark Madden. Tony was the boss. Didn't act like it, but he was the voice of reason, the voice of experience, giving us the advice and, hey, don't do this. Let the picture tell the story. Tell you another thing Tony taught me way early was, he said, a good announcer will not bring in one additional viewer, but a bad one will chase away thousands. And I never let that escape me. Whatever I was doing, I always remembered, I'm not bringing, nobody's paying to see me. Nobody's dialing up this channel to watch me. But if I'm not careful, I could chase them all back to Raw or chase them all back to whatever the hell's on the other channel. So I always kept that in the fore.
That's good. That's good advice.
Very good.
He kind of plays the humble card. Tony does. But man, he has been around.
Yeah.
And he deserves everything he's got right now. I'm glad he's back in wrestling again.
God, Tony's probably been at this 40 years.
Yeah.
Because the Crockett's pulled him from their baseball broadcast to make him a wrestling announcer. He was a baseball guy.
Yeah.
And the Crockett's own, I don't know if it's AAA or AA team in Charlotte back in the early 80s, and Tony was their broadcaster. And they moved him over to be a wrestling announcer.
Long time.
You never know where you get started.
Yeah.
You're spinning records and doing high school football. You're calling minor league baseball in Charlotte. You're like Mike, who was running the sports book at a casino in Vegas. You never know when that call is going to come and when you're going to get your shot.
I think each person added so much during that time, during that mid to late 90s. And you mentioned Larry Zbyszko.
Yeah.
I liked him as a broadcaster. A lot of people say he wasn't the best, but I really liked. He brought something different to it.
That's right. He was a color guy.
He was
and he was not supposed to know all the moves and all of that. He's not supposed to be able to tell you the story. He's supposed to impart the passion of what he's seeing, of what you're seeing, through his voice, and that's what he did.
Yeah.
And because he had been in the business for a long time, and he worked his style, he knew what they were doing. He could watch a match and break it down like you break down, like a tablature for a banjo player or a X's and O's for a football coach. He could break down the match like that in his head and then communicate that out. You go back and watch his commentary, he's pretty much doing that. Yeah. He's never saying, okay, what they're going to do next. He's not like Tony Romo, where he's going to predict the next play or the next, move sequence. But he's setting it up with his commentary to get you ready for what you're about to see.
Yeah. It was just a great time during that time.
Absolutely.
And how did the whole thing, was it because they let Bobby go? Is that why you got the Nitro slot initially?
I don't know. I wish I did. Those kind of decisions, I know that makes the most sense, because one week Bobby's there and next week I'm there. But I don't know what went into that. I don't know if it was Bobby's out and Scott's in, or if it was Bobby wanted out and they had to find somebody to plug into that spot without hiring somebody. I don't know. You know, didn't matter. Doesn't matter to me. Doesn't matter now. You know,
Yeah.
it was fun to do, and I wouldn't trade anything for it.
Um, and Eric was still in the company during that time, so would he have been the one to say, "Hey, Scott, you know"?
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. We know that was when Vince was in there,
Okay.
Russo,
Yeah.
and that from and this was a rough period, but from one week to the next, you didn't know if Eric was in charge, or if Vince was in charge, or if Eric had been sent home, or Vince had been sent home, or if both had been sent home and Kevin Sullivan was running things, which was great because Kevin running things would have been wonderful. Um, so I honestly can't remember. I'm sure when I got the call, it came from Tony,
Okay.
not Eric, but I don't know what above Tony happened
Yeah.
to start that.
And was that your first live thing you've done with WCW when you got the Nitro?
Well, I did Nitro in '99 for 3 weeks. They wanted to pull Tony off of the show just to give him a break.
Yeah.
I think he wanted some time, and they can. And this was there. It came to me and said, "We want you to host Nitro for 3 weeks or for 2 weeks, so Tony can take his first vacation since like 1981 or whatever." So,
Yeah.
sure, what do you want me to do? So, you know, go see travel, book a flight to wherever it was. I think it was Memphis and Cedar Rapids,
Mm.
and then or whatever those two nitros in a row. So we did it, and they worked. But the bad part of it was the ratings went way up. Not because I was on the show; it's just cyclical. So Eric called me and said, "We need you to be in Rockford for Nitro." I said, "Sure." You know, first thing, like, what happened to Tony? He goes,
Yeah.
"Oh, nothing. You know, everything's fine." But he said, you know, the ratings went up, and we've got people watching the show that don't know why you were here, and we've got to pull you off the show. It can't be just you one week and then Tony the next. We got to have a reason. I said, okay, cool. So I go to Rockford, and they come up with this idea to have Rick Steiner beat the hell out of me.
I remember that.
And I mean, I told him when we were working it out backstage before the show, I said, look, I played ball. I'm not a wrestler, but you know, don't take it easy on me. You can hurt me. You know, I've been through worse. Just make it look good.
Yeah.
Just kill me. He said, "You sure?" I said, "I'm 100% sure. Just do what you want. I'll be dead." Said, all right. So we worked it out. He comes out, pulls me over the desk, throws me in the ring, beats the hell out of me, and I mean, he's really punching me too. I mean, it was. So I'm laying there dead set on everything. Security comes and gets Rick out, and so I'm the host of the show. So there's no commentary, and goes to commercial. So during commercial, the EMTs are the production crew, right? So we're in a commercial, and I can't remember which one of the crew gets right next to me, and he goes, "Scott, we're about 15 seconds out. Don't laugh." I said, you know, cut my mouth closed. I said, okay. And when, you know, they count us back in, Eric is on the commentary booth or in the commentary table, and the camera is like 2 inches from my face. That's why I don't want me to laugh.
Yeah.
Because I was going to be, and then they, you know, they pull back and did the beauty shot of me in the ring and this falderall going on. I'm dead from Rick killing me. And they put me in the backboard and the brace, and Eric's like, "Oh my God, you know, Scott's dead." And they roll me out of the, slide me out of the ring, put me on a gurney, take me out, get me to the ambulance, and then they do the old, you know, the ambulance doors closed, somebody taps it, and the ambulance pulls off.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in the ambulance, and they go back to another commercial. So I'm in the ambulance, and the EMT guys are like, they know I'm okay. These are the real EMT guys because I'm in a real ambulance. And they said, "What time have you got to be back?" I said, "I don't. I'm dead."
Yeah.
You know, why? He said, "Because we just want to stop and get cigarettes." I said, "That's fine. Take your time." I don't, I'm dead. I don't know what's going on. So then we stopped by like a CVS or something near the building, and they go get cigarettes, come back, and they um, drop me off at the hotel. So I wouldn't be back at the building.
Oh man.
I mean, you can't beat those kind of stories. Like, yeah, they have paid me Bobby Heenan money, maybe, but I don't know if I would have had those kind of stories.
Yeah.
Can't beat that.
Yeah. How different was it? Is even in the headset on a live broadcast? What are you hearing? Versus what you know. Whoever it was, who was it? Was it Mark Madden that come in at that time with
Yeah,
you?
Mark came in. Um,
How does that
well,
work?
I don't know what Mark and Tony were hearing, but and I assume we were all hearing the same thing. We would hear from whoever's running Gorilla, and that was usually Terry Taylor. Um, and I love Terry Taylor. I think he's just I'll put him way up here. I love Terry. Um, but Terry to me was always Terry. Ask the question, Taylor, because that's what he would always say in my ear. Ask the question. Ask the question. Ask the question.
Oh,
Why is he here? What happened to him? Why is he pulling out brass knucks?
yeah,
Who's this woman?
yeah,
Ask the question. Ask the question. That one, it was never like, say this, put over Skittles, talk about what's trending, talk about the pay per view. It was just always ask the question.
yeah.
Ask the question. Some shit would go on, ask the question. Terry's a genius.
And on the shots where usually it's maybe I don't know top of the hour. Definitely in the beginning where the announcer introductions are, and the three of you sitting there.
Right.
Can you hear Tony?
Sure.
You can hear Tony, but do you hear anything? Is Terry in one ear and Tony in the other? Or how does that work?
The WWF, WWE was different.
Okay.
But in WCW, we heard each other. And then when Terry or whoever was running Gorilla, Kevin, whoever, wanted to say something, he would just hit like a defeat.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't hear anything except then.
Okay, I got you.
But they also wouldn't talk long because we needed to know that when they pulled off defeat, it wasn't like, Scott, can you hear me? Tony's been talking to me and I couldn't hear him. They would just like quick hits, quick in and out.
Yeah.
Ask the question. Who is this?
Ask the question.
Ask the question.
Well, there was a lot of questions probably being asked.
Oh yeah,
during that time.
There was a lot of stuff going on that last couple of years, and Terry with his ask the question stuff. Sometimes the question was, I'm thinking of asking is like, who booked this?
Yeah.
That's not the question he wanted me to ask. Like, who thought this was going to get over? Oh boy. Not about to ask that question though.
Oh man. What pay-per-view was it where it was supposed to be Hogan and Sting? Not way after Starrcade 97. This was like I want to say Halloween Havoc. Maybe Halloween Havoc 99, maybe. Where
could be. I haven't committed those to memory.
Well, it was they play Hogan's music. Hogan don't come out for a long time. Then they play Sting's music. He comes out. Then they play Hogan's music again, and it takes forever. And he comes out, and I remember he had like a black vest or shirt or something. What Tony calls it, street clothes.
Right.
And he comes in and says something to Sting, and then just lays down. And this was before, Bash at the Beach 2000.
Before with Jeff and all that.
Yeah.
I honestly, I don't remember that. I'll take your word for it. But when you've done 6 gazillion shows and matches, that one just doesn't sound familiar.
Well, I want to.
So during that run, I wouldn't be surprised.
I want to say it was the same pay-per-view with DDP and Goldberg, where it it ran out of time. The time bought for the pay-per-view, it ran over and it blacked out. I want to say it's the same one, but I'm not sure. let's go to Bash at the Beach then. There's so many people. Some people say, it was all, what we call, what not what we call, I'm not in the business, but what y'all call a work. And some people
Sure.
say it was what y'all call a shoot. Shoot meaning this was a real situation. A work meaning it's not, basically, for people that don't understand that.
I've heard so many takes and stories on that.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard from Vince. Never heard from Hulk, obviously. Heard from Jeff. I think that it was the version that I think, and I don't remember whose version this is, but maybe it's an amalgamation of versions. But the version that's closest is that it was a combination of both. That at the end of the night, Booker was supposed to emerge with the title.
Okay.
That was
The ultimate.
and that's what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, show's over, Booker's champion. I think that was what was supposed to happen. Vince was going to cut promo on Hulk, but I don't think Vince was the booker. So it wasn't like he had to run it past anybody. And if you looked at the run sheet, it probably just said like Vince promo. That was it. But and so some of that was supposed to happen. Some of it obviously wasn't. Some of it was supposed to happen, but some of the people involved didn't know it was going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's us.
Okay.
We didn't know. On that night, it was for us a complete shoot because we didn't know what was going to happen. We know enough going in. Like we'll know if the finish is going to be screwy.
Yeah.
Like somebody's running in or Austin's driving in with a beer truck or what. And we know that kind of stuff. But as far as the layout of the match and what exactly is the finishing move, we don't know. We know who's going over, but all of that was something we didn't know. Now, was it something that Hulk and Eric and Jeff had worked out beforehand among the three of them? I don't know. But I know that we didn't know. I would think that I think it's a combination. Obviously, Vince knew what he was going to do. Jeff obviously knew what he was going to do.
Yeah.
I don't know that Hulk knew everything that was going on. In fact, I would bet the farm he didn't, because if he did, he hired a lawyer and went to court for no reason.
Yeah.
So I think that's what it was. But I do know that, what's that, 23 years ago, we're still talking about it. Just like they're talking about the screw job with Sean and Brett.
Yep.
Still talking. So something worked.
Yeah.
It got people talking and they haven't stopped.
Yeah. I've always wondered what y'all, if y'all knew anything prior, because obviously they probably wanted to get the real reaction, to come across. So, so they wouldn't fill y'all in.
Exactly right. That's why they didn't smarten us up.
Yeah.
If in fact it was a work.
Yeah.
Because I think I even said on the show, like, I think I said those exact words, because it wasn't. We didn't know what was happening. We didn't know what was happening next.
Yeah.
We've got the Skittles instant replay of the week, taste the rainbow or fruit flavors.
Yeah.
And we got nothing to show.
Mm-hmm.
We were gobsmacked as everybody else was.
Well, when Vince Russo come in, how did things change? Or, what changes did you notice between, before they brought Eric back with Vince, when Vince came in after they let Eric go home during that time?
Right.
Did Vince just have a meeting with everybody, and like, how did that work? Did he,
That was, as they say, above my pay grade.
Okay.
I'm just, the announcer. That all I
Yeah.
know is, am I still on Nitro Monday night?
Okay.
Okay, I'll be there. That's it. So I just all what I see. And again, we're there all day. So we've
Yeah.
seen the format and the run sheet and the pre-tapes and the production meeting. So we know what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like we see it for the first time the minute the red light goes on and the pyro hits.
Right.
We know what's happening. So I didn't notice a whole lot of difference other than who was in charge of the production meeting. Was
Mm-hmm.
it Eric? Was it Kevin? Was it Vince? Was it Ed Ferrara?
Yeah. When they brought Eric
All of them would
back,
have been fine, fine.
yeah, when they brought Eric back with Vince and they did the whole Millionaires Club versus the New Blood.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember they had like a reset. All the titles were vacant, and on that Nitro episode in 2000, I think it was.
It
And
was. I remember that. I thought that was a brilliant way to do it.
yeah, it was. I did too.
And people go back and look at it now. I don't know that people really shit all over that angle back then, but anybody that did probably just dreams of something that good happening now.
Yeah, it's better. Yeah,
It was really well done. I'll tell you this quick story, Andrew.
yeah.
That was in Denver, Colorado, and it was also the Nitro. And I think I'm right on this. The Nitro, obviously that part's right. That Nitro where we started the Millionaires Club and New Blood. The next night was the first Thunder taping. I think if it wasn't the first, it was the second or third. It was done
Okay.
on Tuesday night, live to tape, and then aired on Thursday. Whatever. And I was supposed to be on that Thunder. We do the Millionaires Club, New Blood stuff. And as memory serves, it was April 10 that we finish and go back to the I go back to the hotel and I call my wife. I said, "Hey, did you see the show?" Actually, I think that was my first Nitro as a full blown member of the team.
Oh,
Too huge night.
wow.
And said, I called my wife to see the show. She goes, "Yeah, you need to call your mom." And I'm like, "I need to call my mom." Okay. Look, did you see when this happened? Did you hear when I said this smart ass line? I'm just trying to, still basking in what I thought was a really good show. And she goes, "You need to call your mom." And I'm thinking she's just trying to be nice. My wife's a very nice person. Just call your mom. This will mean more to her than it does to me. I don't care anything about wrestling, whatever. So after I think, okay, I'll call her. And I'm still talking to her. She goes, "Look, call your mom. Your dad died tonight."
Oh my God.
And so I was kind of taken aback. So I said, "Okay, let me call her." So I call my mother and find out my dad passed during the first commercial when I had said, "We'll be right back." And then he goes to take out the trash, I think, and has a heart attack and was dead before he hit the ground.
Oh, I'm so sorry, man.
It's been 22 years ago. It's moved on, but
Oh,
thank you though. But so then I called Eric and Vince and told them, and I said, I need to get back to Georgia. And they said, "Go do what you got to do. We'll figure something out." So I got back home, had to go catch like a 5 a.m. flight, which was whatever, 7 a.m. in Atlanta. Got back and dealing with my dad's estate and funeral plans and all that. So that was from the penthouse to the outhouse in a pretty quick trip
yeah.
that night out there in Denver. But to the not to belabor that point, it was a terrific angle. I mean, that footage that's still out there, I guess, and I'm sure it's on the network, of that ring full of all of the talent that we had, just getting ready to reinvent the company.
Yeah.
That was as good a job at resetting things as any. People were bitching and moaning about the artist formerly known as Prince Iaukea and that 70s guy Mike Awesome, and this is dumb, and Jim Duggan's not Canadian. Okay, we're going to reset. Now, all that other stuff out the window. We're going to start over. And I thought it was just incredibly well done. And it was a cool angle too, because there was a lot of that heat,
Yeah.
and TNA did it with the what was it called? The $1 Million Mafia. What was it that they with Sting and Scott Steiner and Kevin? Oh boy, the something Mafia. They were like the guys that were the established stars that were holding the younger guys down.
Yeah.
That was all the Millionaires Club and the New Blood was, because it was to a degree a shoot.
Yeah. Yeah.
There wasn't any heat
Yeah.
for real, but people could see that we had
Yeah.
established stars and we had people that not everybody knew that we were trying to build up, and the stars were kind of not wanting to give up their spot, and you can't blame them. So there was a lot of shoot to that, and it reminds me of that sign. And I'm going to misquote it, but the sign that Jerry Jarrett used to keep in his office in Memphis, which said, personal issues draw money. That was the sign that Jerry Jarrett had in Memphis. And if you go back and watch Memphis, other than the, the monsters and all that kind of stuff, but it was personal issues draw money.
Yeah.
And this was personal issues, and we were hoping it was going to draw money.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, and there were some good angles too. Even the Hogan and the Kidman thing when that first started.
Kidman.
That's
good. What everybody remembers, and that was great.
Yeah,
great angle. And Shane Douglas and Ric Flair that everybody had wanted to see, because Shane legit hated Flair.
Exactly.
They still.
Exactly. Yeah, and you know what else I remember about that time too? I think it was a Thunder taping, where it was just chaos the whole show. Everybody was just fighting. Had these climbing on the Nitrotron, and these were in the ring, these were outside, these were in the crowd, and then they end up turning the school bus over, like picking the school bus over, like flipping it over. It was the Millionaires Club, I think, that flipped it over. I remember that.
Good grief.
And like you said, that right there, that people probably did since especially nowadays, armchair quarterbacking has shit on it. Maybe not at the time, but it's still better than what's out there today, in my opinion. It is, and even in 2001, after that, whenever that kind of dissolved and you really, there was not a lot of direction at all in the angles close to the end in 2001.
Yeah.
That's still better than
correct. It started off great, and that's true. I agree. I mean, people will, I really wish things were as good as it was when Mike Hamer was the artist formerly known as Prince IK. Oh, those were great times when people were shitting all over it then.
Yeah.
But then they actually saw how bad it could be. And that point gets to the end of the competition between the WWE and WCW and ECW.
Mm-hmm.
On any given Monday night when everything was hot, those 83 weeks when we won that Eric talks about on his podcast, and even afterwards, there were 8 to 10 million people watching wrestling.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes more were watching us, and it ended up that more were watching Raw than Nitro. And then at the end, a whole lot more were watching Raw instead of Nitro. But there were still 8 to 10 million people.
Yeah.
Now, or when they bought us out and we went under and ECW went under, I mean, those people didn't die. They just stopped watching wrestling because it wasn't good anymore. And that competition, whether it was from Paul E or from WCW, made WWE better. And then when they had no more competition, they had no more incentive. They were the only game in town. They didn't have to be creative.
That's right.
They didn't have to build stars. They could just coast, and they just coasted and watched their audience go straight down to where they would put out press releases when they would have over 2 million viewers. I'm like, 2 million viewers? You guys used to beat us by 2 million viewers, and we still had 5 million viewers, or 3 million viewers. And now you're bragging that you've got 2 million people. And I get that, the entertainment platforms have changed with streaming and 600 channels and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Not in 2002, it hadn't. in
No.
2003 and 4 and 5, and they just stopped watching you because it wasn't good anymore. And again, those people were still out there. They just said, you know what? I'd rather watch, who the hell knows, Swamp People or American Idol
Yeah,
than watch you. They did.
that's exactly right. I mean, and
And
there
that
was,
that sucks because that hurts the
it
business.
does. It hurts the overall business. There's no competition anymore. I mean, look at the competition. You would not have Steve Austin just raising hell and driving a Zamboni to a ring or beer truck. You wouldn't have all that if it hadn't have been for necessity. You know, they were trying to
Right.
outdo, each one was trying to outdo the other, and it brought out the best in everybody. It
In
was
both.
such a time.
That's correct. That's exactly
God,
right. That's
it,
100% exactly right.
it was such a time. And, you know, I want to know too, I'm sure a lot of people want to know how long before the WWE, WWF, whatever, bought WCW, how long before that happened did you have an idea that it might not be good? It might be on its way out.
Uh, um, how long? Minutes? I mean,
That's about
well,
what
it
I
wasn't
figured.
quite minutes, but we didn't know. I mean, during that time in 2001, we heard that, again, to bring Jerry Jarrett back up. We heard that Jerry Jarrett was going to put together uh, a group to buy WCW, and then we heard that Eric was going to find a group with Fusion Media to
Mm-hmm.
buy WCW and keep it a separate entity, and keep it airing. And then a man named Jamie Kellner, who has added nothing to the entertainment industry in his whole life, um, canceled everything. Cancel TV, cancel syndication packages, syndication networks, cancel pay-per-view contracts. We don't want that as part of our corporate family. We don't want that, meaning wrestling fans. So we went from being what we were and worth $40 million, maybe not,
Sure.
not super huge, but worth something,
Yeah.
to when without TV we were worthless.
Uh-huh.
Had nothing to generate cash flow, generate revenue from house shows or from pay-per-views or merchandise. Worthless, you know. And so when he did that, when Jamie Kellner did that, the company, Vince, I don't know what the number was, $5 million, whatever the number was,
Yeah, it wasn't much.
maybe less than that, and bought everything that we had. And when that happened, we were told, there was a Nitro that Monday night at Panama City Beach at Club La Vila. Was it Club La Vila?
Yeah.
I think it was. Um, and we found out that Thursday before that Monday Nitro
Shit.
that was going to happen.
Oh man.
Because until Wednesday, was it going to be Jerry? Was it going to be Eric? Was it going to be, somebody else? Was it going to be, was AOL going to just keep us and, spin us off into a separate division of AOL Time Warner and not part of Turner Sports? It was a million different things. And then when Kellner canceled all the broadcasts, it was over.
And
And then he ended up getting fired like 6 months later.
yeah. I mean, the one thing I've always kind of been confused about that whole deal with Jamie Kellner. Okay, Eric had put this deal together with that Fusion Media group. He had already been in talks with a
Right.
different network, moving the headquarters,
Right.
all kinds of little things he had, was working on. It was in place, thinking that he was going to have the TV time. I've always wondered,
Right.
he couldn't have just assumed that he was going to have the TV time. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't go out on, a group is not going to be invested on an assumption of, that kind of thing. So why in the hell did Jamie Kellner just at the very last minute say, nope, forget it? Like, you're not getting the TV time. Like, why even say at the beginning? I mean, he had a,
He did.
it's
Yeah.
just,
He didn't like wrestling fans. He did not like how wrestling fans looked. He didn't like the fact that they didn't buy, high end motor vehicles, that they didn't buy high end wine and alcoholic beverages, that they were, going to be buying Chevrolets and buying beer, you know, and he didn't want to have that kind of demographic on his network on TNT because he wanted,
Unbelievable.
I don't know what the word is, but that's what he wanted.
No matter the ad revenue that WCW had brought in, no matter the publicity it's got for Turner, no matter none of that, doesn't matter.
He just didn't like wrestling fans. Now, I'm yet to have a conversation with Jamie Kellner. He's welcome to call me. I'd love to.
I'd like to talk to him too.
So I don't want to put words in his mouth. That's the version that we were told. Now, if the truth is something different, I stand to be correct.
I just don't see at the last minute.
Heard anything different in 22 years?
I thought, well, did Jamie say, okay, you can have the TV time and, you're putting together this deal. And then at the last minute said, no, change my mind. I would really like to know.
Well, that's a question for Eric. And Eric probably would like to know that too.
He probably would.
Because Eric got thrown under the bus in that whole deal too.
So that last Nitro,
Jerry did too.
Yeah, everybody. That last Nitro in Panama City, you see Vince McMahon open the show. I'm sure y'all have I guess y'all have your format like you always have, but you don't really know.
Yeah.
You don't really know. I mean, you're saying all these things like, what is Vince McMahon? He's bought the company. What is he? Our jobs are, we don't know if we're going to be here.
Yeah.
You're saying all this kind of things.
Well, we did know.
You did know ultimately.
It was not good news.
Yeah. And the end of it, how it just does the simulcast and just kind of just cuts off. Yeah. Was there something on there? Did it just kind of end on your sheet? Or, did y'all think y'all was going to get to say goodbye and everything? I know you got to, on Worldwide, right?
Worldwide, yeah.
But on Nitro with you and Tony,
right?
How did that work? Did y'all know y'all was going to be cut off? In other words,
yeah, we knew that we were going to have an hour and a half, I think, and then after that, it was going to be a simulcast with Raw, and we knew that it was going to be Sting and Flair, and that was going to be the end, and we knew all that. So everything that night went exactly according to the format. There were no surprises. We didn't know what Vince was going to say.
No, yeah.
But again, what possible difference would that make? We were going to react to what he said. We didn't know what it was. But Vince is a pro. He's not going to come out and say, something so ridiculously dumb that we have to act like that's what we believe. He was a heel when it came to WCW, and he played his part. And so we knew what was going to go down that night. It wasn't like Daytona Beach.
Yeah.
The difference between Daytona Beach and Panama City Beach is a whole state apart, and also worlds apart when it comes to knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah.
In the ring.
Oh, for sure. So I guess you just got paid the remainder of your contract, until that was the plan at the time, right?
Yeah. We all had contracts. I assume we all had contracts, and we all were paid. We weren't paid by the WWF. We were paid by AOL, Time Warner, Turner Sports, whatever that corporate entity was, because they were our contracts were with them. And so, they paid us, I don't know, however long we had left on the contract, but contracts are never more than a year for us anyway. For talent like, in-ring talent, I don't know if they had longer contracts or if they had like 30-day outs or, who knows. Contracts are the least fun aspect of law in the world. So
Was there anybody
But I
else?
know that they paid me to do nothing.
Yeah. I mean, you can't beat that after working that hard for so long,
Oh,
like you have, especially two jobs. I mean,
yeah, it was. That was boy, that was a long time ago.
what, did anybody, was you in talks with anybody else? Did anybody else reach out to you as far as, you know, you to do announcing or anything like that during that time before the
No,
WWE did?
no, there was. Well, I did a little bit. I did some stuff in Nashville for Burt Prentice for USA Wrestling,
Okay.
because Burt was a friend from years before, and I like Burt a ton. And it was good new talent. And as it turned out, that the talent that he was using in USA ended up being a lot of the basis for TNA. I remember the first show um, that I worked, the or not the first show, the actually it may have been the last show that I worked. The it was kind of a showcase of his talent for the TNA group, for Jerry Jarrett and Jeff Jarrett and all those people who were there but sitting up out of sight just to
Mm-hmm.
watch the talent. The main event was Chris Harris and James Storm against each other.
Oh,
Um, and they were incredible. Those guys are just amazing, and they saw something in them, and so they were there on the first. They were like, we can do something with those two, not as singles feuding, but as a tag team, and they turned into America's Most Wanted. So
wow.
that show, and AJ was on that show, AJ Styles.
Oh, yeah.
Lot of talent that ended up getting picked up by TNA was on that USA show.
Wow. And that would have been is that '02?
I guess it'd have to be, yeah, because TNA started in '02.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been in the first half of '02. This was the famous one where Cornette had words with, I think it was Ed Ferrara,
Okay.
because he had so much heat with Vince Russo and Ed. I like Vince too. Ed, Vince is a terrific guy to me. I love Vince to death. But of all things, to have heat with Ed Ferrara, you got to go out of your way to find something about Ed Ferrara not to like. And just because he was in Jimmy's mind kind of inexorably tied to Vince, he just had words for Ed, and I'm sure Ed is like, "What did I do?" I think it was it was a lot because Ed had played that Oklahoma character
Oh,
in
God.
WCW.
Yes. The spoof of
So,
Jim.
but
Yeah.
yeah, it was a little bit of that, but it was really more that he just really hated, and I guess still does, hates Vince Russo.
Mm.
I don't understand. I like both those guys so much. I wish they could. Actually, I'll put this out. Vince and Jimmy, if you guys just want to come down to the lake, we'll cook out, we'll get it on the boat, we'll settle it. We'll just get it all out in the open. So come on down. Love to do that.
I think they should. No
That'd be
reason
great.
not to. No reason not to.
And if nothing else, you get, free booze and a boat ride.
There you go.
What the hell?
Can't go wrong either way. Everybody gets along when there's a little free booze involved after a while.
True. That's a good point.
But did Jim Ross reach out to you on the angle, the WCW angle?
Um, well, when the WWE bought out all of the contracts,
Mm-hmm.
or bought out WCW, they didn't buy the contracts. They had meetings with all of the talent, and I'm using that word. Believe me, I don't consider myself talent, but in their vernacular, I was. And they had a suite at the Ritz Carlton in Buckhead. I don't know if you've been. You're close.
Yeah,
Maybe to
outside of
Atlanta.
Atlanta. Yeah, yeah.
At Lenox Square and Phipps Plaza, right in the heart of Buckhead, the real high end district up in the north side of Atlanta proper. There's a Ritz Carlton there, and it's as frou frou, and it's a really nice hotel. Highly recommend it. They rented a suite there, and for 2 or 3 days, Jim stayed there and met with talent, and they would call and schedule you a time to come meet with him because he was director of talent relations at the time. And so I went to meet with him at my appointed time, walked in, hadn't seen him in a long time. And I just walked in, I said, "Man, it's good to see you," hug. And I just said, "Look, I'm not interested." No offense, but I'm not interested. And he goes, well, that's why we're doing this. I said, I appreciate, what you guys had to do and what's going on, but not me, not doing it. Can't do it anymore. And so I still had an hour. So then he and I just sat and talked for an hour about old Mid South stuff,
There you
which was
go.
great. It
Yeah.
was worth every penny they would have paid me. I
So
think the world of that guy. Then other people came in behind me. Probably next behind me was Disco, and I came in after Mike Sanders, whoever. I don't remember that, but
yeah.
it was just one parade of people coming in to meet with Jim as director of talent relations to see what could happen, what they may have available. But I put the kibosh on it right out of the box and said,
Yeah.
nope.
So you really don't
Because
even
that
know.
schedule I gave you earlier, I wasn't doing that anymore.
Yeah, I don't blame you. So you really don't know what the offer was going to be.
No, no
Yeah.
idea.
How did the one off
But I
thing
do
go?
know that from talking to some of the other folks, and especially talking to Joey Styles, who I got to be friends with there for a bit, it would have been probably less money than I was making in WCW.
No, it's disappointing. Man.
Yeah, it was. They don't pay. Um, I mean, they pay their in ring talent. I don't know if they still do this downside guarantee stuff or whatever, but they pay them huge amounts of money. And again, this was 20 some odd years ago, 23 years ago, that they weren't paying their announced crew or their real crew, a whole lot there.
Mm.
And again, you're talking about having to live in New York City too. It's not
Yeah,
like living
yeah.
in Marietta.
Um, how did the one off thing kind of come about with you? You had you and Arn doing the Booker and Buff.
Uh, they, when I had the meeting with Jim and told them that I wasn't interested, they were cool with it. It's business, and they were completely professional. I got a
Mm-hmm.
call from Kevin Dunn and said, we want to try something and we want you to be a part of it. We know you're not going to be full time, but we want to do a 2-week thing. And he laid out what they were going to do with the invasion. And I said, okay, that sounds great. So he said, terrific. We'll send you tickets to Tacoma. We'll do 2 nights in Tacoma, a Raw and a SmackDown, and then we'll do 2 nights in Atlanta because the Atlanta was the week after that. Then we'll do 2 nights in Atlanta, a Raw and a SmackDown at the Georgia Dome. And so that's what we did. I did everything they asked me to do. And I did everything I wanted to do. I'll tell you that too. But again, they were terribly nice. I know Kevin Dunn gets a lot of heat. I don't even know if he's still around there anymore. Probably not. But they were all elite pros. Kevin, Pat Patterson. Only met Vince once, just a handshake in the production meeting, and that was it. But everybody else I had to deal with could not have been nicer.
So there was never any
Shane.
Shane, yeah. So there was never any talks, about anything long term, at any time.
No.
In other words,
Never. Not with me.
yeah.
Mm-mm.
Why in the hell?
I mean, no offense to him, but I just wasn't doing that anymore.
No, I totally get it. I mean, you didn't know nobody nothing. You've been doing this for
Yeah, and plus I wanted to work, 40 hours a week,
yeah, sure, yeah,
not 90.
yeah. I mean, obviously, Atlanta is where this should have happened at. If they were trying to really, as y'all say, get this over at Ted Turner's backyard, WCW's backyard, home court, not Washington. So to this day, it's like it was just all made a mockery of.
Yeah, I agree. I agree fully. Had they done the invasion angle at the Georgia Dome, it would have. I mean, who knows if it would if you've got Buff and Booker working a match that looked like it belonged on Pro, and not something that belonged as the main event on an invasion to launch an angle. There was so many things that went wrong with that. But to do it in Seattle or Tacoma, rather, which is not exactly WCW territory.
No.
I mean, it would be like anybody except the Eagles playing in Philadelphia. I mean,
yeah,
they're going to hate you.
yeah,
It doesn't matter who you can be. Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, the greatest, this week, according to ESPN, go into Philly, they're going to hate you. It doesn't matter how good you are or who you are. They hate you. We're going into their territory, ostensibly. They're going to hate us. It's not going to get over. A week before we go literally across the street from where WCW was headquartered, and then again, they screwed it up 9 ways to Sunday. But again, there is some school of thought that was their goal the entire time.
sure.
That they wanted to do everything they could to destroy the legacy of WCW. And other than people like Ray and not Ray, but people like Eddie and Chris
Yeah,
got there early and got over in spite of
yeah,
them being WCW people, but that was before the buyout. Post buyout, you had Booker and Ray were the only ones really long term that stuck around. You had the odd Chuck and Billy thing, and then Page's thing,
yeah,
and then Goldberg still doing, but he was gone forever.
yeah.
So you didn't get hardly any of the WCW guys that were allowed to make a difference.
Right.
And they were booked that way. It wasn't because they weren't good. They were just booked that way. Another one is Shane Helms, who just by sheer will and talent stuck around.
Yeah.
But again, we're having to, less than 5 that made it out of 60.
Do you remember thinking when they were laying this out to you for the 2 weeks thing, why is this not going to like culminate in Atlanta here? Why are we not?
Yeah, I thought it, but that's not my scene.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna tell Eric, this NWO thing sounds cool, but it's a ripoff of what New Japan did.
Right.
I think you can do better. I'm not gonna tell him that.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna tell Vince McMahon, it's your company and your millions of dollars, no. So I'm not gonna offer an opinion. Number one, it wouldn't be respected. And number two, I'm not that big a fan of my opinion. I figured he's making millions. I'm not, so I'll let him make the decision.
Yeah.
And I'll just do what I'm told.
I think you're right. I think it was just, they wanted to humiliate it. And I was such a hardcore WCW fan that in my mind, I'm like, okay, you won. So why take the extra step there's people that are really fans of this company and the history, the tradition of this company. They could have really done something with that, but they made it a point not to.
It goes back for me to 1987 when Dusty was booking Jim Crockett Promotions, when Vince had consolidated everything under the WWF banner, and Jim Crockett saw that and said, the only thing I can do is the same thing. So he went out and bought Championship Wrestling for Florida, bought Central States, and bought UWF, Mid-South Sports, from Cowboy. And when Dusty was booking, Dusty's idea was destroy those territories and make them WCW people. So what Vince did with us was exactly the same playbook as what Dusty did with Florida, Central States, Mid-South back in 1987. Killed them, destroyed them. We talked this goes all the way back to the beginning. We talked about the Birds coming back. The Birds come back. Birds never headlined another Omni show
Yeah.
because they were UWF talent.
Mm-hmm.
Terry Taylor and Chris Adams split up the tag team. You name it. Jim Duggan and Ted DiBiase left, went to the WWF. I mean, he just blew up all those territories, the territories and the talent. That's the exact same thing Vince did, except it wasn't a territory. It was WCW.
Yeah.
They did the same thing with ECW too.
Yeah. Just follow suit. Just keep following.
Yeah. And some of those ECW guys stuck around. Rob Van Dam did, and a couple of the other ECW folks, but not a whole lot. The Dudleys did.
Yeah.
But again, that was an amazing roster. Didn't want them, just wanted to destroy and bust up the company and destroy the legacy. But when you win, that's what you get to do.
Right.
The winners write the history. And he won, and we lost. And you're the only person that remembers I was ever in the wrestling business.
No. Hey, I think some of the stuff that you and Bobby and, you and Tanae later on did on Worldwide is gold.
Oh, it was fun.
And
you could tell we were having a good time.
You could. And I'll tell you, when you did the 1-900-909 hotline thing, you took some old sayings and mannerisms or whatever you'd call it from what Vince and him was doing at the time. I've wondered about that too.
I stole pretty much everything from Rocky, The Rock.
Yeah.
I just remember every one of those things when we were doing the promo for the 900 number. It was, what's another catchphrase that Rocky uses? Because he used a million. So I had material for a year, and not knocking him. He's incredible. And so that was by design, obviously.
Yeah.
And I do remember that Mike was at a hockey game in Montreal, I think, a Canadiens game, obviously. And I can't remember. It wasn't with WCW, but he was up there. Maybe he was up there for WCW. He was up there for something, and he went to Canadiens. And Mike Tenay is a humongous hockey fan. And you make this pilgrimage to Montreal, you got to go to a Habs game, and he did. So he's in like a suite, or not a suite, but a box. And in walks Rocky, who's, they were in town or, passing through. And so he had heard Mike was in there, some other WCW guys. And Mike told me the story. He goes, so Rocky walks in, never met him, nice guy, big as all outdoors. And he just said, "You're Mike Tenay." And he goes, "Yeah, very nice to meet you." And he goes, "Tell Scott Hudson to quit stealing my material."
Then it's all worth it.
And laughed about it. That's right. That made it all worthwhile.
That's a great story right there.
That was how he introduced himself to Mike. And again, he was kidding around. Obviously, I could not be less of a threat.
Nobody ever gave you shit about doing those.
No. Again, they're paying me the WCW equivalent of $5 a month. We get away with murder.
Yeah.
As long as we're not violating any copyright, which brings to mind Lee Marshall.
Oh,
when Conan was doing I think they were doing the Filthy Animals bit. Conan had a finisher, or I don't know if it was a finish or a move he called the Tequila Sunrise.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a drink, that everybody knows.
Mm-hmm.
So Lee is calling play-by-play on one of the shows when I had just started, because Lee and I weren't together that long before he left, but he was doing play-by-play. I'd make it up. If I was doing pro, he was doing the Saturday morning show, whatever it was. So that happens, and the move goes through, and then Lee just on mic during the show, just after the movie, just goes, "It's another tequila sunrise," and just sing. Lee had that huge booming voice that Lee had, and did it, and it aired, and they got a letter
I bet.
from the the Eagles, because the Eagles don't
No,
play
no, they do
that
not.
stuff.
They don't.
They are crazy. You talk about getting blocked on YouTube. They
Yep.
will block you. They'll probably block you for me
For
doing
that
that.
little piece.
You have to bleep that out. But yeah, they sent a nasty letter, and I don't think anything ever happened. But the word came down. Whatever you do, don't sing "Tequila Sunrise" when Conan does the move.
I used to love the
But
one eight
little
hundred.
stories like that, man. You don't hear those stories anymore.
Yeah, I love them. I can't get enough of them, man. I used to love the 1-800 collect stuff. The little stabs he
Oh
would take at Bobby, the weasel.
yes,
I never, I didn't know what the thing was with that, but it was great every week.
it was just something. I mean, I don't think there was any heat there because Lee was
Yeah,
always in the next town. If we're doing
yeah,
Nitro in Tacoma, Lee's in Atlanta.
yeah,
Where we're doing it next week, and he's hosting the Nitro parties or whatever. And
yeah,
we're gonna, and then he'll come up with something that would always end with Weasel
yeah,
to take a rib at Bobby, and then Bobby would come back on him, and it
yeah,
just again, it was only to make you remember, because he would do that, and then he would go for 1-800 collect. I'm Lee Marshall, and you remembered that it was 1-800 collect,
yeah.
because he just knew what he was doing, and it made you remember the sponsor. And if you take the piss out of Bobby to help the sponsor get noticed, then all the better.
Man, can you imagine all of the free publicity that Valvoline is getting from the network?
Oh boy,
Is that not amazing? Nobody
yeah,
thinks about that.
yeah. I don't. I don't work on my own car, so I don't know. But is Valvoline still around?
Yeah, it's a
If they
motor oil.
are, they are they're loving life. I mean, I don't know how many people watch the network. Um, I mean, far less than would watch a network like NBC.
Yeah, yeah,
But again, you're not paying for it. You're
right.
just going to Valvoline instant replay of the week or whatever. Good for them.
And the bumpers and
Free
everything.
advertising.
The bumpers before the guy who was the guy that did those voiceovers, the really good broadcast voice that would do those bumpers and do the
Oh,
commercials.
I can't remember.
Oh
I
man,
remember the voice, but he was a voice for hire, but he was outstanding.
yeah,
But I mean, he's doing WCW, then he's doing
movie
Swamp
trailers.
People, and then
Yeah,
he's doing everything else in town. He's just like Krusty the Clown.
yeah. Well, when you ended worldwide, going back to that before I forget, um,
Right.
did you know was that tape before y'all found out what was going to be happening, or was that
Worldwide,
after?
we did on Wednesday afternoons, after work when I went through that litany earlier.
Okay,
So Nitro ended on that Monday night. We would have recorded the worldwide that aired the following weekend, the previous Wednesday.
okay,
So 10 days out. And that Wednesday, we didn't know. We found out the next day what was going to happen. So we recorded two outros. And one of them was just, we'll see you next week, like normal.
yeah,
And then the other one was the one that aired where I said, we'll see you down the road or whatever.
yeah. I mean, you actually got to say goodbye. You did.
Yeah, we were the only ones. Mike and I were the only ones that was it. It was Mike, wasn't it?
It was Mike. Yeah,
Was it me and Mike that did that?
yeah,
Yeah, we were the only ones that got to even have anything close. And that was the last WCW broadcast. I think there was a couple of international syndicated shows, but those would have been done a couple of weeks out. We wouldn't have done two outros. It was only voiceover.
yeah.
So we wouldn't have said anything. But that would have aired anywhere except the United States.
So when that aired, actually, it had already been done, obviously, when it aired on TBS.
Right.
But who produced that? Because the ending on that, when they're rolling the credits, is interesting. because they're showing tearing the set down and they got all these nicknames for all the crew. So I've wondered whose idea that was.
Right. Oh gosh. Hell, it could have been Neil Pruitt. Uh, God, there was so many great producers. Woody Kearse was there. Chris Larson. Boy, I'm gonna now to start trying to name people. I'm gonna leave somebody out. Boy, I can't even remember them all. It's been 20 something years, but
Yeah.
every producer there knew what they were doing. They're an incredibly talented bunch of folks, and so I'm not surprised that that got shoved in. Again, it's not nothing inappropriate.
No, no.
A lot like the Holy Grail. They talk about llamas and somebody getting sacked and all that. That's that same kind of vibe. That it's the last one. What are they going to do? Fire us? We don't
Hmm.
work here anymore. Off you go.
Have you saw that?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh,
I'll be honest with you. That one's kind of hard to watch
yeah,
because I mean it's just me and Mike sitting in the studio. It's not not
yeah,
some kind of morose thing, but it just does remind me of the end. I just
yeah.
wish we could have kept going. I really wish we could have.
I mean, I know you really mean that too, because so many people were so. I was so glad it was just a shithole. It got into it was bad by the end, and I was so glad to see the doors closed on it. But uh, I'm I feel like you do. You were right there in it, but I feel like you do. I wish it could have kept going. You know?
Well, people that said that, they're entitled to their opinion. That's cool. But the people that said what you said about the product then, not all, because there's never an everybody or anything like that, but I dare say the vast majority of those people would give anything to have wrestling like that again.
Oh yeah,
Um, Maybe a whole lot less, the fat chick thriller Mike Awesome,
yeah.
God
That's
rest his soul. He didn't care for that either. Um, but people would love to have that back
yeah.
because there was always something else to watch. You never knew on Nitro what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And Nitro fed every other show, and then Nitro fed a little bit to Thunder, but Nitro and Thunder fed every other show, and you just never knew. On Saturday night, Barry Darsow comes out dressed up like Payne Stewart and playing golf in the middle of the ring. What the hell is that? Chris Adams comes out and loses every week to job guys,
Yeah,
and it was going to end up that he became this maniac and became this ultimate Saturday night heel. There's so much stuff that you just didn't know what was going to happen, um, and then it was gone.
yeah. It's sad. It's still sad. You know, you when you think
It
it.
is.
I mean, I'm sure it is for you. You were right there in it. You were a part of it. You were the guy that got to say goodbye for on behalf of the company.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
big thing. That's a big piece of history. That's always going to be there. And I'm glad that you at least had the opportunity to do that because Tony didn't. And Tony says he don't care, but I can't help but be like, man, come on, you got to care a little bit, you know? I don't know.
I'm sure he does. But Tony is, and I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but Tony is very much a professional.
Sure.
With Tony, it was I worked there. There is no more there.
Yeah,
Now
yeah,
I work here,
yeah,
and I'm going to do the best job I can for them, and
yeah,
that's fine. That's the kind of employee I would
yeah,
want to have. That's the kind of boss I would want to have. But there's a part of me we talked about earlier. Part of me is still this dense Mizzou Fizzark out there that just wants to, be back in, with my granddad in 1970 again. And no, that's obviously never going to happen. But that's what I wish. I wish I could go. I wish I could go find that again.
yeah. Me too. I think a
But
lot of people do. I
yeah,
really do. You still watch any? You watch anything now? You watch
uh,
AEW?
wha- uh, I'll catch AEW pretty much every week. I'll watch Raw but what I'll usually read the recaps to see if there's anything I really want to see
Yeah.
on there. It's certainly gotten a lot better since Hunter is running the show. I mean, and it's night and day. It's so much better. Impact I like a great deal. They're kind of like the undiscovered country out there. They're what some of the stuff they're doing. Hell, all the stuff they're doing is incredible. So yeah, I'll in order I would catch AEW, Impact, and Raw. And if they, the Wrestle Kingdom's coming up, in a week or so, I'll watch that from New Japan. That'll be fun. That's always a
yeah.
good show.
Yeah, New Japan, that's like a whole different thing there. I enjoy New Japan. I do.
Yeah.
I do enjoy watching that. Well, have you ever run across any musical people or anything like that in this whole wrestling journey?
Oh yeah, we got Eric was big into that cross promotional stuff. We had the Kiss
Mm-hmm.
demon character come in, which God love Brian Adams, who was the first one. Nobody remembers that. He was the first Kiss demon for one night in Vegas at the MGM Grand. And then it was Dale Torborg, who's also great and did a terrific job with the character. But we got to hang out with Kiss. I'm a huge Kiss mark. So is Shivani, by the way.
Yeah.
We would both just, try to out trivia each other on Kiss stuff. But so hanging out with them was amazing. Again, really nice guys. I remember we were Gene Simmons was in town, and we all got together at the WCW place out on Log Cabin, and that was where the power plant was. So we were walking through the power plant, and Gene's I'm 6'1", and Gene's taller than me, so he's got to be like 6'3". He's a big fella. And we're walking through there, and he goes, "So tell me, when is the Kiss Demon going to win a match on Nitro?" And I said, "You're talking to the wrong guy, Gene. I'm just in sales." And I remember he popped. Making Gene Simmons pop was pretty cool. And we did a thing with Megadeth, where they played Georgia Dome when we did one of those Georgia Dome shows when Goldberg was running hotter than hell. To bring another Kiss reference in, I think about that. But Megadeth played. So I got to meet Dave Mustaine and the rest of the guys in the band. Again, just the one thing I remember about them, they're all very, very tiny people. I mean, you don't really get an idea. And I don't mean like in character. I mean, they're just they're like 170 pounds and 5'9", and you just want to like, do you need somebody to walk with you just in case? I mean, somebody's going to beat you up. But they were just so nice and so talented. Trying to think of who else we dealt with. We would have musicians backstage, a lot when we would show up in cities. Met Bruce Springsteen, I think, out in Denver. Met Donny Osmond when we were in Salt Lake. Talk about and another tiny guy. Both of those guys, little fellows. Not to belittle them, to coin a phrase, but just they just come across as so much bigger than life.
Yeah.
You go see Springsteen do one of those 3.5-hour mega shows, and he closes it out with 10th Avenue Freeze Out and then Born to Run, and it's like, oh my God, this guy's the greatest thing. And then you meet him, and he's like 5'9.5".
Yeah.
Just a really soft spoken, pleasant fellow, and it was like your accountant.
Yeah.
So we got seeing guys backstage and then doing the with Megadeth and with Kiss, and we did the thing with Master P that really didn't go well. But you roll your dice, you take your chances. I'm trying to think if we did anything else. Any you remember? I think that's all that that are jumping out at me.
I don't know if it was ever on air, but I know that Billy Gibbons would come around some backstage.
Oh yeah. He was when we would make a run through Texas, he was one of those backstage guys.
Yeah.
I don't think they ever played. But yeah, he's a big fan, would show up. I mean, it ended up being that he was sort of ubiquitous. We're playing Dallas, well, Billy Gibbons will be there. We're playing Austin, Billy Gibbons will be there.
Yeah.
I'll tell you somebody else was Bob Gold from Husker Du and Sugar, 90s alternative band.
Mm-hmm.
Bob ended up is a big wrestling fan and ended up being on the booking committee, believe it or not.
Really?
Nobody remembers that, but Bob Moole was part of the booking committee in WCW. Again,
Wow.
just a creative as hell guy. So when that happened, I'm like a huge Bob Mole fan. So I'm like, you're kidding me. Bob Mould is on the booking committee. And yeah, he is. And, so got to meet him, hang out. That was fun.
Well, what a life, man. What a life.
That was fun. It was fun.
Uh,
And
really,
I'm staring at retirement coming up here in a couple of months. And
man.
at 58 years old, I keep thinking like, God, what's the next 20 years if I've got them left? What's that got in store? Because the last 40 have been nuts.
Well, you sure deserve retirement, and just get
Take
to
it.
kind of take it easy, and or take it as easy as you want to, that kind of thing.
I'll probably
Uh,
just I'll probably finally buy Peacock just so I can watch the network and
I,
watch old stuff.
I think they have a promo going on right now, like a
Good,
discount, so you can hop
good,
on
good.
that.
Sign up today.
So, Scott, I appreciate your time. Good talking with you.
You
Uh,
too, Andrew. Thank you.
really, really enjoyed this conversation,
Me
and
too.
appreciate y'all tuning in to Picking It Out, and we'll see you next time.